Yo, what's going on, you guys? This is your boy RBG, aka the Random Black Gamer, here with me, myself, and I on the ones and twos, and this is where you see the reactions, the place where I react to everything I ain't never seen. And today we are jumping back into that Warhammer 40K territory, because it's been a while, man. It's been like a month or so since I've actually given you guys any kind of reactions pertaining to this awesome franchise that I have become fixated on. Y'all already know I'm getting that Warhammer 40K Space Marines 2. As soon as it hit the shelves, I gotta pick me up 2 copies. Hopefully they got a deluxe edition, because I'm pretty sure it's going to be called the Super Big Dick Edition or something like that, but that's besides the point. The last time I reacted to a Warhammer thing, I think I reacted to if the Emperor had text-to-speech, but I also had reacted to something that I thought was going to be pertaining to how Space Marines are made, because I know that's a very complex routine where they undergo serious surgery and all these different implants to make them super soldiers. But no, I just watched cutscenes to a game. I think it was Space Marines 1, and I was very disappointed in that. But I did go away enjoying myself for the most part, because I got a chance to bear witness to the legend who is Captain Titus, who I'm actually going to get a chance to control when the next game comes out. So I can't wait to see that, you know. I know little bits and pieces about how these characters are made, but I always wanted to know the full versions of how they're made. You know, I've heard about the ranking system, how they have these little studs up in their head that kind of determine how many years they've been serving the Imperium and stuff of that nature. And I also know about the heavy bolter guns, which are these machine guns that can pretty much rip their enemies to shreds or blow them to pieces and shit. But this time, I just really want to see everything there is to see when it comes to these interesting characters that go by many names. You know, they go by the Guardian Angels of the Humans, Adeptus, Astartes, so many different aliases to describe their badassery. You know, like I just want to know more. So we're going to be doing that, except this time I'm not going to be reacting to Bricky's video. I'm actually going to be reacting to another content creator who is also legendary up in this Space Marine Warhammer 40K community, and that is Lewitton09. So Lewitton, I hope you don't mind me reacting to your content, sir. I will be sure to give you credit in the description, just as I did verbally. But anyways, I'm not going to waste any more of you guys' time. I'm ready to jump into this and see what they're talking about. I'm probably not going to talk as much because I'm trying my best to kind of hone my skills when it comes to the whole reacting thing. I just get a bit overzealous and hype when I see stuff that I'm very much interested in. So yeah, I can be talkative, but I'm going to try to dial it back. So if you guys love that, I'm sorry. I'm going to dial it back, and I'm going to take some pauses for the cause to give my thoughts on those things as we go along. But yeah, let's go ahead and jump into this shit, man. Here we go. LT in the place to be. Lewitton, as you can see, in the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. I repeat, there is only war. The space debos themselves. Okay, is the audio out? Am I not hearing things, or is my setup fucked up? What's going on?
They shall be my finest warriors, these men who give themselves to me. Like clay I shall mould them, and in the furnace of war I shall forge them. They shall be of iron will and steely sinew. In great armour I shall clad them, and with the mightiest weapons they shall be armed. They will be untouched by plague or disease, no sickness shall blight them. They shall have such tactics, strategies and machines that no foe will best them in battle. They are my bulwark against the terror. They are the defenders of humanity. They are my Space Marines. And they shall know no fear. Space Marines are humanity's most elite fighting force. They're the defenders of civilization, but their immense power is forged through a harsh selection process, extreme genetic and body modifications. This grueling transformation kills many recruits, and those who do survive it are left arguably barely human. The conversion from weak mortal to demi-godlike superhuman is one gifted to only a tiny amount of humans in the 41st millennium. An Astartes, when his transformation is complete, will be stronger, tougher, mentally more powerful by factors than an ordinary human. And while a Space Marine's prime mission is to protect humanity, Their physical disparity from ordinary common humans can actually leave many astartes to look down on these lesser common humans, while others will feel a renewed sense of dedication to protect those who can barely protect themselves. It's important to remember that Space Marines are the defenders of humanity and not the rulers of it. Humans, for better or worse, have been the leaders of the Imperium of Man until recently with the return of Primarch Roboute Guilliman. While the transformation of a human to Space Marine is complex, you'll often hear the terminology of a gene seed be used. Now, a gene seed is not literally a seed, but it is a specific organ that each astartes carries with seed-like qualities. It's a term used to describe generally the genetic material of an astartes. It's more accurately the cells and DNA required to engineer a human into an astartes. The gene seed, more specifically though, refers to the Space Marines' progenoid glands, and the clue is in the name there when you think of progeny. These organs in a Space Marine respond to the other genetic implants they have and replicate DNA. Essentially, they are, in a manner of speaking, an asexual form of reproduction, which is why when a Space Marine is fatally wounded on a battlefield, an apothecary will fight to recover his gene seed. It's also why, yes, Space Marines do not require heterosexual reproduction.
Wow.
5 years from implantation, a Space Marine's neck progenoid glands can be harvested, but the chest glands won't be harvested up until 10 years. Space Marines essentially depend on themselves to produce new Marines for the chapter. Lastly, in this general sphere of discussion, to answer a very commonly discussed topic, are Space Marines actually castrated? And then, how do they excrete waste?
Right.
Well, I can't actually recall anywhere in written law this being noted, so if anybody has a specific point of reference, please do link it. But my speculation, based on a few things that I've kind of looked at, is that pretty much the canon opinion is that Space Marines have no sexual drive. However, when it comes to excretion, it's true that their armour is also an environment suit that would cycle and process their own waste, much like a still suit in the Dune universe. Also, Space Marines do not live in their armour, although they may wear it for extended periods of time. It can be removed. It's entirely possible that their external genitals are removed and they have implants to take care of waste, but I've got nothing to see that it points towards this. So it's an unknown, but it's not something that's critically really important in the scheme of things. It's equally possible that it's just seen as an organ as with everything else and they just leave it all be.
Alright, so far so good. These guys are built different in a lot of ways, and I didn't expect the lore to just go in some of the more minute details that I thought would have been asinine, and I put emphasis on the word ass and nine. You know, apparently these guys, they don't have to shit, and even if they did, they would just do it all through the suit, and there's a possibility that they don't have any dingle dangles down there, which I find funny because they do have these big ass loincloths, or at least based on the characters that I've seen up in the Space Marine video games. Like I've seen Titus, he got the loincloth, which I thought covered up his gigantic earth-shattering balls, because like I said, guys, these dudes are super strong. They make these loud thuds when they run and shit like that, and I wouldn't be surprised if they create these massive craters after teabagging their downed opponents. I don't know why, I just have a nagging suspicion that's what they would do. Like they would cause a massive Dragon Ball Z type crater. There's other layers of complexity to these characters as well. Obviously they have a more abnormal mental focus compared to the lesser beings, which I think is going to be cool, because I do remember watching the Astartes fan video where these guys were unfazed by a lot of things. You know, you had one that got his hand blown off and it was nothing to him. You know, like there's so many unique traits that make them superior in every way and walking deities in their own rights. It's no reason, you know, it's no wonder why other lesser beings refer to them as angels, you know, like these guardian angels anytime they appear. But anyways, man, let's go ahead and jump back into this, man. It's gonna be the history of these mofos. Here we go.
Now, before we look further into how a Space Marine is forged in the 41st millennium, let's remind ourselves how they were created over history. Now, the first form of Space Marine was originally created by the Emperor during the Unification Wars of the late 30th millennium. Earth at this time was a barren wasteland of scavengers and barbaric warring tribes after civilization had imploded as a result of the Age of Strife. Earth, being cut off from its supply routes in the warp, cannibalized itself and fell into total anarchy.
Boy.
After the Emperor originally created techno-barbarians, a crude adapted form of super soldier, he would form them later into the Thunder Warriors. These warriors were brutal, powerful, and most importantly, highly unstable. The Emperor knew that he wouldn't be able to work with these soldiers forged in the fires of anarchy beyond the unification of Earth's warring tribes, and so he secretly constructed his genetic facilities in a fortress deep below vast mountain ranges on Earth. Here, he would, with some few remaining gene rights, create his Primarchs using his own genetic material as a template. Then subsequently, the very first of the new breed of warriors, the Space Marines, or Astartes. But what are the Thunder Warriors? Imperial records state that the Thunder Warriors were nearly all wiped out during a particularly bloody battle at the end of the Unification Wars on Mount Ararat. Conveniently, the new Legiones Astartes were created readily to replace them.
Legiones.
Now, records from this time are understandably fragmented, but described eyewitness accounts from the few Thunder Warriors to survive this battle, like Eric Tyrannus, stated that it was in fact the Emperor himself who massacred the Thunder Warriors.
Damn.
Others have stated that it was also in collaboration with his custodian guard. In several instances that occurred since this time where Thunder Warriors have appeared and faced their Astartes brothers, the Thunder Warriors have nearly always managed to inflict casualties beyond expectation before they are finally felled. This gives some indication of how powerful they were as warriors and why the Emperor felt they were perhaps too dangerous given their power and psychological instability to function as a disciplined fighting and defensive force for the...
Now, for some reason, I'm getting heavy Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood vibes with the way that the Emperor went about producing these particular Primarchs. It seems like with the Thunder Warriors, they essentially are like a representation of his wrath, you know, because they are so unstable, you know, and he can't really just do a lot with all that unstableness. He needs all of his Primarchs to actually work in tandem with what he has going for himself, you know. He's an ambitious guy. He wants the Earth or the humans to, you know, be good, not cause so much chaos, because that's the thing that got us here in the fucking first place. I'm liking these guys. I'm really loving them.
The new Imperium. Regardless, this whole situation is a dark and little spoken of episode for the Emperor of Man. Vocalizing these events would no doubt have some Inquisition or Ecclesiarchy on their way to you very promptly.
Ecclesiarchy.
With the Thunder Warriors killed in the Battle of Mount Ararat, the new Space Marines, the Legiones Astartes, would come to the fore. Unlike their Thunder Warrior forebears, they would undergo rigorous mental training as well as physical and genetic modifications. This would give them immense physical traits, as well as being near unbreakable with their mental conditioning. The new Marines were initially segregated into 20 legions. This separation was not for simple organisational purposes. Each legion was imbued with genetic traits from their Primarch, and as such this impacted their character and behaviour. To ensure unity, the Emperor designated them to stay together in their legions to reduce friction and ensure cohesion of the Astartes brothers. Through recruiting and conquest of human colonies as the Imperium expanded, so did the Astartes legions. What had begun as a handful of Marines swelled to tens of thousands during the Crusades. This would lead later to heavy damage caused during the heresy after the Primarchs holding such immense power, being the sole commanders of each Space Marine legion.
Wow.
After that period of chaotic incursion, Robert Guilliman, Primarch of the Ultramarines, would draft the Codex Astartes, and the remaining loyalist Primarchs would, after much consideration, agree at best that the Space Marine legions be split into chapters. This was to ensure no Space Marine legion could wield the sheer weight of power they had during the Crusades and subsequent heresy. This was known as the Second Founding. Each of these chapters would take a permanent homeworld or fortress monastery in the Imperium. The Codex Astartes states that each chapter would be 1,000 battle brothers in number and manage its own recruitment. A specific development in the creation of a Space Marine was discovered after the Horus Heresy: weaknesses in the gene seed.
I ain't gonna lie, he like something my grandma would buy, like the gold Astartes character right here. Look like he been dipped in gold and molded in the form of a space colossus from X-Men or some shit. He look badass though. He one of the more regal versions of these Space Marines though. I like the red ones though. They look super sick, like some walking dirt devil vacuums or something, man. And I like the weapons too. They got little checkerboard patterns on them, and very cool.
As I previously explained, the gene seed is the core biological component in the creation of a Space Marine. During the Heresy, Space Marines were created on a massive scale, and as with any biological replication process, if you do this on a large scale, then mutations and errors can occur in this DNA replication.
So they gotta take their time.
So another result of the implementation of the Codex Astartes by Guilliman was to slow the process of creating a Space Marine, to more closely monitor their genetic material and the material implanted within new recruits to ensure purity and expunge defects. Guilliman would also establish core genetic banks on Terra to ensure a stock of genetics existed.
Guilliman.
These pure sources would provide new material for the foundings of Astartes chapters and also prevent any further contamination.
Recruitment.
As previously described, each chapter is responsible for its own replenishment. It chooses where and how to locate potential Space Marine candidates. Many will recruit solely from their own homeworld, but others will reach out to hive worlds of the Imperium to locate powerful and resilient fighters who have shown promise and an unnatural ability in combat, even potentially recruiting from gang fighters in hive cities. Feral planets can also be good for selection, as the humans here are physically tough and have to deal with daily hardships more frequently than some other Imperial planets. Surprisingly, less recruits actually appear from the militaristic worlds like fortress planets, maybe because although knowing lives of military discipline, they haven't endured the true horror and hardships that come from the rougher ends of Imperial life. Any candidate for a Space Marine will be usually young, between the ages of 10 and 15 years old.
That young?
Obviously they need to be strong, healthy and fiercely loyal to the Imperium.
Sheesh.
Often on worlds where recruitment occurs, young male humans who show exceptional skill or strength are pushed hard to give them the best chance of potential recruitment. Candidates can occasionally be as old as 20, but the full effect of their biological conversions may not be as effective or complete. Standard trials for Space Marine recruitment often involve combat, endurance, perhaps hunting of some extremely dangerous indigenous animal, and for the few who survive the tasks set by the Astartes who are there to supervise, the rewards are beyond estimation. It's difficult to describe just how revered Space Marines are to ordinary citizens of the Imperium. While they wouldn't be directly worshipped, they are certainly individuals with godlike reverence and awe. Many humans in the Imperium will go their entire lives without ever even seeing an Astartes, and they may only arrive on an Imperial planet once in a generation.
Damn!
On some worlds, they are even somewhat mythical. So for a family on an Imperial world to have their son chosen for Space Marine recruitment and candidacy would be an honour beyond imagination. But from some perspectives, bittersweet, in as all likelihood they may never see them again once they have been accepted, and in very high possibility will probably die in later processes.
Wow.
But it's nonetheless the highest honour to serve the Emperor and the Imperium in this way, and would no doubt lead to adulation, even possible special treatment for families after the fact. Ordinary citizens understand that to be accepted for the conversion to the Astartes, the Emperor's chosen warriors, is nothing short of becoming a demigod. Then again, you could just as easily have been recruited from a hive world full of daily extreme violence, and your gang was just forcibly made to participate in the trials, and you were simply the only one left alive at the end. So that's your flip side of the coin. Pray you never seek acceptance to the Grey Knights. I'll cover that later. Despite all the physical and mental requirements for candidacy, another element is spiritual purity. In the 41st millennium, Imperial society is heavily religious, worshipping the God Emperor, and most importantly decrying the ruinous powers of chaos. Chaplains and the ecclesiarchy will continually monitor society around Astartes' recruitment sources to ensure that there are no signs of taint by the dark forces of chaos.
Alright, that's some interesting details that I wasn't aware of. How much of a rarity it is to see one of these things, to actually bear witness to an Adeptus Astartes in action. Apparently they spend most of their time off of these worlds or on other little locations that are pretty much war-ridden. But when they do appear on one of the more Imperial-ruled planets, It's an honor. I like that. I also think it's interesting that they have a whole process that they can't just mass produce these guys in crazy numbers, or they're gonna risk defects, mutations, and shit like that. You know, that's interesting. It seems like a lot of trial and error went into the whole creative process, especially with the way they've essentially been split into chapters. I always wondered what they were referring to in chapters when I would read up on these characters, but now I understand it's not talking about a chapter of a book. It's just, I guess, the different like hierarchies within this expansive family of Primarchs. You know, you have the Primarchs themselves, and then you have the ones under them, which are the actual Space Marines. So that is interesting in and of itself, man. Like, you have all these guys that some are based specifically after the Primarchs, that they're based after. They have certain like traits and stuff. Like I say, very much like alluding to the deadly sins of humanity. You know, I think each one probably has a swelled up hubris, like pride, or, you know, like they might have some that have like that greed trait and stuff of that nature. Very cool. And then you have to have like the whole purity aspect, which I was wondering when they were going to get into that. You know, I see they showed the one of the Adeptus Sororitas members that I do remember seeing up in the If the Emperor Had Text to Speech video, and they would always yell heresy and stuff like that. So I'm pretty sure that bitch was yelling heresy a lot when she was trying to figure out who was worthy of being a Space Marine. But anyway, let's keep this thing going. It looks like we're going to be on the aspirants now. I can't wait to hear more about the Grey Knights too, because the Grey Knights, they seem like kind of like the outliers, if I can say that. It's been a while since I've been brushing up on my knowledge of all the Warhammer 40K lore, so forgive me for that. But all the different things that I did learn are kind of like coming back to me now. Kind of like that boomerang slogan, if you guys remember watching that cartoon station. But let's get back into this shit. Aspirants.
The easy part over, the selected candidates, now known as aspirants, will begin the ritual process of becoming a Space Marine. This may be a formal process of reciting scripture, or it could involve further trials. These could take place on the homeworld or result in immediate departure for the aspirant. Each chapter has their own private and guarded initiations. Some of these can be heavily traumatic and are usually significantly harder tests designed to break those who show even the smallest cracks of weakness. These trials for the young aspirants may even include ritual slaughter, scarification, even amputation and bloodletting.
Oh my god.
It's all designed to prove their commitment, loyalty, and unwavering faith in the Astartes chapter.
Sheesh.
Unsurprisingly, some aspirants do not pass this phase of testing physically or mentally. Aspirants will continue periods of testing and examination, as well as actual live combat during their period as a recruit for the Space Marine chapter. And some of these trials may be cleverly disguised as coming-of-age rituals, other celebrations some more combat-based. All, though, will be observed carefully by senior members of the chapter and chaplains who will be assessing key traits and behaviours, looking for candidates who fulfil their exacting requirements. Some of these aspirants from Feral worlds or even other worlds may not be truly aware of what Space Marines are, and this innocence may in some way protect them from making overthought errors that cost them later. Still, some chapters actually take little interest in these early stages and will only actually become involved later once aspirants have been further thinned down. The whole process is a physical and psychological minefield. Some challenges could be unachievable, while others the simple act of survival is enough to merit approval to progress to the next stage. All the tests put to Space Marine aspirants are designed to test every element of their being to the limit and expose any weaknesses that are present, as well as learn about how they handle and make judgments on situations they are presented with.
Wow.
While the recruitment age for these aspirants is undoubtedly young, it's worth remembering that the nightmare environment of the 41st millennium is undoubtedly very harsh, and so growing up and becoming an adult quickly is something which many learn to do, and so their age shouldn't necessarily dictate your judgment of them based on our current period in time.
Oh man, I ain't gonna lie, let me just point out that was metal as fuck. You got this chick with nice milk motels holding what looks to be a severed upper half of a body. You can't get more metal than that. But man, this shit is crazy. So it seems like there's no really big benefits when it comes to this stuff. I forgot to mention in my last little intermission, like, Yeah, it's like they sometimes they even go to planets where people are already struggling and they're already kind of thrusted in the midst of like a lot of chaos and war itself. Like they have these war-ridden planets where people are already surviving, and those seems to be the best candidates when it comes to like recruiting the potential astartes. But I am just wondering, like, what are the actual benefits for this shit? Like, do they get a 401k or any kind of retirement plans? Is there promotions that I can have, like certain things that I can actually give back to my family? Or does my family even see me anymore? Like, I know I want to believe sometimes they return home, right? They have to return home for some other trials or some shit, but like, what is my family getting out of this? Like, because the way it is like they're layered on top of like other fucking forms of torture. It's like a triple torture meat burger, if I can say that, because there's so many layers to it. It's like this process in and of itself is like a nightmare. It's not anything that I would consider a blessing. That's for sure, man. Like I can't see myself going through all these different phases where I could potentially have my arms dismembered or have my fucking like arms and legs, you know, just all this other shit, you know, like my fucking eyebrows plucked and all this other shit, you know. If I want that, I'll steal the slide from King Ramses, you know what I'm saying, and suffer his curse of having that song play over and over and over, kind of like on Courage the Cowardly Dog. But yeah, man, I just don't see the benefits of this shit. Like, who would want this? But anyways, let's go ahead and get back into it, man. This is gonna be the trials. Here we go.
Standard Astartes trials for these young recruits can include knowledge of self. Astartes look at recruits' mental strength equally to the physical. The horrors they will face in their lives as a space marine, despite later conditioning, require the strongest character in a recruit to be successful and worthy. They may use a chapter librarian to impose psychic horrors on a recruit to see if they survive the nightmares they're forced to witness.
Shit looks brutal.
He may be forced to take drugs and face the worst parts of his own psyche. The stress and trauma of this trial can often physically affect their bodies as well, so in many ways this becomes the ultimate test for recruits. Completion of this trial will undoubtedly fundamentally alter the young recruit forever. Some chapters, like the Imperial Fists, consider this kind of mental testing especially important, but do so by exposing their recruits to literal physical pain, and we use devices like the subtly titled Pain Glove. These hook into the nervous system of the recruit and inflict horrific pain, but also maintain their consciousness well past what a normal individual could handle. The result will either be a mentally toughened but probably scarred individual, or a complete mental breakdown and death. An obvious and standard test for many recruits is exposure. Most worlds of the Imperium have unforgiving environments, and so sending out recruits into these wastes with little to survive with is an easy way to tell who is strong enough as a candidate. Space Marine apothecaries can rebuild damaged individuals, so the test is less of can you survive without consequences, and more simply, can you survive? Many worlds are severely irradiated, frozen wastes, toxic wastelands, or ashen wastes, where planets have suffered total ecological collapse. Alternately, a planet could also be a literal jungle full of horrific creatures, small and large, ready to tear you to pieces or just melt your face off. As stated, the test is simple: survive for a set period of time. It will also likely involve some object of crossing a distance from A to B, so as to avoid recruits just digging a hole somewhere and sitting in it until time has elapsed. Some of the tests could well be impossible to complete and are simply assessing who can survive longest or travel furthest before dying or near death. The Ultramarines and Space Wolf chapters are known to favour exposure testing. A fairly self-explanatory trial, recruits are pitted against one another in one-on-one combat. When the last few remain, the assessing Astartes will usually halt the assessment. The type of duel could vary between armed or unarmed combat, consecutive combat, or recruits switching out on completing rounds. There is one constant though, and that is it's always a fight to the death. Again, apothecaries are able to heal most ordinary human wounds with ease, so these fights are often fairly no-holds-barred brutal affairs. Amputation and heavy trauma being the norm. Unsurprisingly, duels are the Blood Angels' trial of choice, but others such as Dark Angels, Imperial Fists and Space Wolves also put this trial to their recruits. War is life in the Imperium, and although some worlds know this more than others, planets used for recruitment usually have some form of regular combat going on. This trial is less a trial and more a means of assessing potential candidates. Astartes may have observed headhunting particularly strong champions, or they may watch them from orbit, observing infighting between tribes on Imperial feral worlds. In this trial, recruits are tasked to head out into their homeworld and slay a beast for causing chaos or harm to their world.
Okay.
Many Imperial worlds host highly dangerous life forms or worse, orc infestations. The recruit must go out alone, or sometimes in small groups, and return with their captured hunt, often alive. With these group hunts though, the nasty twist is that there can only be one successful recruit, so they could turn on each other, break off alone to achieve or steal victory. I personally question the validity of this test. Fighting to the death to show strength over others seems plausible, but setting out in as a group but then betraying other recruits seems to go kind of against the traits Astartes look for in recruits.
Imagine that. It's like you've been dwindled down to a small number already, and you feel like you're in that top percentage of characters that's gonna actually get that blessing of being one of the astartes, only to realize that, hey, I didn't even stand a chance. I was gonna be just another statistic, because these motherfuckers, they have such a structured way of doing things. Like I say, I think this makes sense in the grand scheme of things, because we've already deduced that they cannot just be mass producing all of these warriors, because there's gonna be that one thing that gets fucked up. So I think it's genius and a bit heinous that they have to do it this way. It's like they have to constantly put these guys through the ringer until there's only one left standing, and that's probably a process that's repeated over and over and over for the millionth time, you know. It's kind of reminiscent of how Siths go through things, because if you guys are familiar with Star Wars, like Darth Maul, who was one of my favorite characters, in order to become a Sith Lord, essentially he had to be put through the ringer. He had to undergo so many different things, like pertaining to his pain threshold, constantly being put through all these different rigorous activities and stuff until he became immune to it. You had to essentially be psychologically broken, which I think is good too, because of how crazy and fucking insane the world is of Warhammer, or the galaxy at large is. You know, it has its fair share of soldiers and demons and different beasts of many kinds. So by the time these guys actually hit the battlefield and take on the real things, there's nothing that they haven't seen that's crazy to them. You know, they're pretty much just immune to it and unfazed and unbothered, but completely worthy. But yeah, man, I just want to get that 2 cents out there, man. Tell me what y'all think about that. But let's get back into this shit.
Anyway, on returning home, they'll be required to slay their successful hunt in a ritual in front of their community before being led successfully away in the throes of glory. Lastly, the quite vague challenge trial. And this is exactly what it is. Some form of probably unsurmountable challenge. This could be to attempt to fight a full-blown space marine in combat.
You gotta get
an impossible task, you might imagine, but usually remember, this is the 41st millennium and bizarre occurrences are abound. While the thought of a child fighting a space marine seems insane, remember, the task is usually to see how they approach it, not necessarily their success.
Right.
In some extremely rare situations though, the aspirant may actually beat the space marine challenger. As completely impossible as this may seem, that individual usually will hold some unusual or rare power and will go on to become a legendary hero of the chapter. The aspirant will also usually be armed, while the Space Marine unarmed and without his power armor. Still, as with most of the former trials, the test here is really about if they can just survive at all, not so much best their opponent.
Mm-hmm.
Other arguably more horrific tests though could be non-combat based and test a recruit's strength, speed, mental skill or resistance to toxins. So they might for example be forced to drink nightmarish toxic chemicals, lift weights so heavy they break their bones apart, or evade some kind of horrific dangerous trap. Recruits deemed to have succeeded by whatever standards, however unlikely, will then be restored by chapter apothecaries. Ultramarines and again Imperial Fists favour these trials. Clearly, a great many recruits will not survive this stage of assessment, but even those who fail to be accepted but by some miracle survive will usually be heavily respected for having done so, not just by their families and friends, but by the assessing astartes. Having done no wrong but maybe just not made the cut, these surviving but unsuccessful aspirants who were assessed on their home world may return to their former communities, a rare occurrence. Or they may continue on to serve the chapter as a serf, a menial but loyal servant who takes personal care of, say, a marine's armour and weaponry. Those returned to their homes are extremely few, but surprisingly are not perceived as failures. It would be made clear to all that having just survived, they have shown sheer strength and integrity as an Imperial citizen. They would then likely go on to become a strong leader for that world as Imperial Guard, Planetary Defense Force, or some other leadership.
Nice. Very nice. Neophytes.
Successful aspirants will now become Neophytes. They will move on to the next stage, where they'll begin the early stages of conversion to a full Space Marine, with the initial implantation of the gene seed, and chemical adaptation of their genetically enhanced organs. This could mean immediate departure with a Space Marine brother to the next phase, or it may be that they are allowed to celebrate in their home community before departure. A very huge moral boost for the Imperial community there, and also to help reinforce Imperial values and loyalty. To be able to say your community gained a successful Astartes recruit is no small thing, and statues, paintings, songs and stories will be told for many years, if not generations to come. Neophytes will be expected to engage in training for combat as well as other mental training, as well as following chapter lore. If a Neophyte should break chapter lore through ignorance or unthinkably by deliberately doing so, they will expect severe punishments. A Neophyte breaking chapter lore will not simply be thrown out, they would likely be mind scrubbed, live out their lives as either, best case scenario, chapter serfs, being menial servants, or worse, forcible amputation and body conversion to life as cybernetic drones and slaves as servitors.
So you basically get the RoboCop fade, you know what I'm saying? You get that Alex Murphy where you got the skin in the front, but nothing but metal at the back, you know what I'm saying? Y'all remember when they fucked up RoboCop up in part 2 and his legs and shit was all dangling and shit, and he was all like, basically like some shit like that, man. It is so strange that they have anything of the sort which is considered punishment, because this whole process is punishment in and of itself. You basically have to do all this shit to test your might.
Test your might.
Like, see how much pain you can endure. How long can you stay up in this fire before you run like a bitch and tell somebody to put you out with their piss? On the flip side, though, I think it is cool that they have this this entity or person that is like super advanced when it comes to healing, so it'll be nothing to restore you for your to your proper health, you know. So I dig that, but I don't know, man. It's like they are deliberately breaking you to the point to where you're just not gonna have any kind of personality, and I think that's the actual focus right there. That's the main objective, is to get these guys mentally broken till they don't even know how to think anymore, because at that point they've experienced all these different forms of pain. Like what else is next? Like, what if these guys like have kids or wives and stuff like that? Do they have to see their wives and kids get slaughtered in front of them? Like, do they have to like shred whatever love they have for individuals? Do they have to like shred all those emotions and throw them to the wayside? But punishment. This whole ordeal is punishment. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if like they just serve these guys bowls of so-called cereal, but instead of cereal, it's like fucking bolts and nuts and stuff like that, like little bolts and screws, and the only thing you get to use is almond milk to wash it down. The fuck out of here. Here we go.
Successful Neophytes immediately will begin conditioning to be implanted with their gene seeds and relevant genetic enhancements. Space Marines must be male because the gene seed is only compatible with male hormones and genetics. So no, you won't see female Space Marines. The Neophytes also need to be tested for compatibility. I'm always kind of surprised that this doesn't happen before the recruitment trials, but anyway, so they're tested for compatibility, otherwise as with organ transplants. Rejection would be fatal for the Neophyte. Even with this testing, it can still happen later down the line. They will then further have their mental strength checked before implantation of the gene seed begins, to ensure that they are in no way compromised by the forces of chaos.
Initiates.
If all these criteria are approved, the Neophyte recruit will now become a Space Marine Scout, or in some cases a full Space Marine Initiate. They will live isolated in the Space Marine Chapter's Fortress Monastery.
Why did I make these names harder than they're supposed to be? Do I have dyslexia or something? Initiates. I said initiates. Oh man, I don't know. I think that'll sound cool. Initiates. Oh man, that's hilarious. But still, man, chances of survival are so fucking slim. You get to all these different levels, and there's just that one spot where you can potentially lose your life, and that's if these gene seeds don't agree with your physiology. You know, it does makes me wonder why they don't test these guys in advance before they go through with this process. That's like a waste of men. You know, you can still do something with these guys because they are already battle tested, and maybe they don't even need the surgery. But yeah, let's keep it going.
On the homeworld, save for any approved missions. The individual will be tutored on battle methods, tactics, psycho-conditioning, values, and the history of his chapter. The reason these early Marines are titled Initiates is because it is still unknown as to whether they will even survive to the final end process of becoming a full battle brother. 19 organs grown from the chapter gene seed will be implanted to the Neophyte Initiate. Some are transplants and others are grown in the trainee Marine's body. The gene seed will also adapt and change and grow the individual's body to become the giant size of a Space Marine, towering over ordinary mortal humans. Much of the body chemistry will be fundamentally reworked during this time, and the gene seed contains genetically engineered viral machines which rebuild the body to the template created by the Emperor. Any implant has a potential to fail, and this rejection will automatically end and probably kill the Initiate. As if the odds weren't stacked against them already, this further thins down the number who survive to the end of this arduous process.
Wow, bro.
In brief, the 19 implanted or grown organs to become a full Space Marine are as follows. First, a secondary heart to increase blood supply and capacity. It can also pump steroids and extra adrenaline for battle situations. The os modular or iron heart. This strengthens and grows the skeleton of a Space Marine so that his bones will contain a ceramic-based mineral which is added to an initiate's diet. After a few years, the Space Marine skeleton will be exponentially stronger than a normal human. The ribcage will have become fused to a solid bone plate, providing extra protection for internal organs. The biscopia is implanted within the chest cavity, and this increases skeletal muscular development, essentially muscle density. The hemastament assists in carrying oxygen and nutrients more efficiently throughout the blood. It also assists in regulating the second and third implants. The Larraman's organ is also placed in the chest and manufactures synthetic Larraman cells. These serve like ordinary human blood platelets, but faster and more efficient. When a Space Marine is wounded, they form fully healed scar tissue in seconds, preventing hemorrhaging. This ability can make Space Marines appear invincible as they take wound after wound. Anything other than the most catastrophic of injuries is going to leave them still standing. The catalepsian node is implanted in the back of the cerebrum. It allows Space Marines to avoid the need for sleep, entering them into a form of ongoing coma, allowing their brain the ability to systematically recharge by individual parts at a time. This enables them to stay on duty for hundreds of hours.
It's almost like they have a fucking Monster Energy drink lodged up in their cerebral cortex. Or a Volt, you know, kicks like an energy drink, tastes like an ass whooping. Some shit like that. So they don't have to sleep. Like, what form of relief is there to even have anymore? Like, what human satisfactions do they even partake in? It's like they can't have sex, they barely even sleep, if any, and now is it even an honor to be a Space Marine at this point? Like, everything just seems like fanatical and delusions of grandeur type shit, you know, like there's almost like no genuineness when it comes to the whole Imperium and their psychology and philosophy on different things. At least they get a nice uniform, and I would like to believe that, yeah, their personality. Some of these guys do have personalities, because we see Captain Titus up in the Space Marine video game. He still has somewhat of a personality, but ain't no telling what that man has been through. You know what I'm saying? It's like he probably got stuck, bound to a chair, and forced to watch The Sound of Music like 100 times over or something, man. That's crazy.
The seventh implant is the Preomnor. It functions as a decontamination chamber above the stomach and will analyze ingested materials, neutralizing any organic or inorganic toxins. It also enables astartes to eat materials for sustenance that would kill ordinary humans. The omophagia is implanted in the upper spinal cord. It absorbs information through ingested DNA and RNA related to memories. The purpose is to gain tactical or survival information by eating animals or life forms indigenous on a planet. In addition to a second heart, Space Marines also have multi-lungs as their ninth implant. 3 in fact. This is to give them extra oxygen absorption in thin air environments. In a toxic environment, their ordinary lungs are shut off to allow the third lung to act as a filter for any necessary toxins. The 10th adaptation is the oculobe. It's a gene seed adaptation that enhances eyesight along the optic nerves. This gives increased accuracy of vision and increased low light sight ability. Lyman's ear is not simply better for more accurate hearing, it enables Marines to resist ordinary human dizziness and for them to be able to filter out white noise and sonic attacks.
Ooh.
The Sasan membrane allows a Space Marine to enter a state of suspended animation. This can enable mortally wounded Marines to survive until help or an apothecary's arrival. This hibernation period has been known to be able to last for anything as long as half a century. Melanochrome alters the pigments in the skin cells, allowing an astartes to shield himself from dangerous radiation and heat. Different levels of this in effect can cause physical differences between chapters, such as the very pale skin of the Blood Angels or the darker skin of the Salamanders. The oolitic kidney filters blood to further remove toxins that have been ingested in combination with the 7th organ. It is best not to think of this though like an ordinary kidney, as this organ functions to assist in removing toxins before they have passed through any normal process of absorption. Otherwise, it wouldn't be very useful. Okay. It also helps to regulate the advanced circulatory system and other organs.
Nice.
The neuroglottis in the mouth allows a Marine to biochemically analyze things by taste or smell, or determine if something is poisonous or safe. Despite their advanced organs, this could still be very useful for a variety of purposes, and it can also enable them to track targets, much like a canine. The muconoid is implanted in the nervous system and, if activated through an external treatment, will cause the astartes skin to secrete a waxy substance. This will cocoon them to protect them in situations of extended suspended animation, even the vacuum of space or other temperature extremes. The Betcher's gland consists of 2 glands implanted in the mouth. These allow the astartes to use their saliva as a corrosive acid when consciously activated.
Wow.
This could enable them to corrode bars if they were held captive or remove doors from their hinges. It also can assist them in eating difficult to break down substances. Some Marine chapters have found that this organ no longer functions or has become less effective over time. The progenoid glands, or the gene seeds, are the critical organs of a Space Marine. They're implanted into the neck and chest cavity and serve as reproductive glands to allow their DNA to be collected upon death and safeguard the continuity of their chapter. Apothecaries of a Space Marine chapter will cultivate germ cells from the progenoid glands to create the 19 organs of a Space Marine, or some of them, because some are grown within the Space Marine themselves. The final organ is the black carapace, otherwise called the interface. This material is implanted under the skin of the chest with the now shell-like ribcage. Fibered bundles then grow inward and interlink with the Space Marine's nervous system. Points for these bundles are pre-cut by apothecaries and form neural connection points. The function of these are to allow a Space Marine to interface with the heavy power armor, or as some would have you believe, the armor's machine spirit. These connections enables faster reaction and maneuverability. Without this, Space Marines would lumber around very much encumbered by the heavy armor they wear.
Okay, interesting. So apparently these guys, they have these things built into them. They're basically, allows them to have backup copies if they die. That's pretty cool. Like these reproductive things or data that kind of carries their essence on you. So even though their bodies have pretty much been brutalized in a very brutal fashion, they can essentially be backed up and remade into another character. That's interesting. That's a way to save a lot of time, if I got that context right. Yeah, I don't know, man. There's so much that comes to these guys. They have 2 hearts and 3 lungs. Like, I wonder if they do like the camels do when they get too hot. Can they like spit their lung out of their mouth and kind of let that shit kind of pump a little bit? Can they do that? Like, there's too much to these guys. Like, they can breathe the different oxygen levels, and if something is too toxic, they can kind of shut off the other 2 and use 1 to kind of filter out some of those toxins and shit. Oh my god, man. But this is the fun part, though. I really, really do like this. And then they got salivary glands that could, secrete these acidic things, like acidic toxins. I'm getting tongue twisted, but that's cool. Like, imagine, like, your baby mama or your wife won't let you up in the house. You could easily just spit on the little hinges and kick the door down, even though you already have these metallic cleats that can do that for you. But it'll be nothing for you. It'll be an easier process if you just spit on something or spit on someone like Carlito from WWE. If you ain't cool, spit right up in your eye and burn your pupils out of your fucking sockets. Badass. Yeah, so we've essentially gone from the dark parts of this process and gotten more into the more amazing, awesome parts. Yeah, so yeah, these are like the different feats that you get, with this surgery, that only the survival of the fittest, only the strongest can actually endure and obtain. Very cool.
It's worth remembering that this whole process probably sounds heavily traumatic, but consider that it ideally happens when the young neophyte initiates between the ages of about 10 to 12 years old and should be then completed by age 18. Many are going to suffer critical or multiple organ failure during the process. The penalty, or arguably mercy for this, is usually euthanasia, although conversion to a servitor for the chapter is sometimes an option depending on chapters and their needs. Again, for those families who never see their sons again, in some cases, it's probably for the best. All they need to know is he's serving the Imperium. Now, more recently, since the involvement of Belisarius' call of the Mechanicum, Primaris Marines are a new breed of superhuman astartes. Under instruction from Robert Gulliman, Primaris astartes are only created from the gene seeds of loyalist Primarchs. They contain 3 additional organs, and their gene seed is considerably more genetically stable. Gulliman had instructed Call to develop these new organs with the goal of creating the Primaris. And their additional organs are the sinew coils. This enables the sinew of a Primaris astartes to be durametallic, contracting with immense force, gifting them extreme strength and his body further resilience. This increased strength will literally enable them to crush the skulls of their enemies with bare hands. The magnifact, and this small lobe is inserted to the brain cortex. It secretes a hormone to increase the body's growth functions, with the goal of also intensifying further functions of the other implanted organs. Apparently, this organ is in fact half of the immortis gland, the god-maker gland of the Primarchs. For undisclosed reasons, Call was only able to discover the right half of this gland, not the full gland itself. The left half had been fully eradicated from Imperial records by either the Emperor himself or others unknown. And third, the Belisarian furnace. This organ lies dormant and connects to both a Marine's hearts. In times of immense physical stresses, it expels chemicals simulating combat stimulants, increasing the regrowth of tissue, bone and muscle. This is a short-term use organ and requires time to recharge after using.
Astartes.
Now, if this incredibly harrowing physical conversion is successful, the neophyte or initiate will have completed the arguably most challenging part of his transformation. However, during these changes, they will still be undergoing some of the most challenging training and assessment regimes humanity had ever known. Psychological and physical conditioning, subconscious therapy, and endless live battle training sessions. Their senses and mental abilities far exceed ordinary humans by the end of this process. Their mental toughness is beyond measure, and an astartes will essentially ignore pain and environmental conditions. An astartes will assault enemies who, to simply look upon, would make an ordinary human suffer a complete mental break. Many, through endless conditioning, will develop photographic memories. Much of this round-the-clock therapy will also neutralize any latent character flaws and create stable, highly single-minded warriors. This endless mental and physical indoctrination will also teach and reinforce high respect for authority and to expertly carry out orders. With that said, it's important to remember that Space Marines are not mindless drones or clones.
Right.
They are individuals, and while always following the rule of command, if a situation warrants it, they are entirely capable of disobeying orders if they believe it to be ultimately necessary. The consequences for this, though, could be, and usually are, potentially highly severe. At the end of this process, the few successful young children who are pitted against one another and survive the ordeals to reach this point will be welcomed as successful young initiates, becoming full Space Marine battle brothers, Imperial Astartes, the greatest warriors in the galaxy.
Nice.
Astartes aging, though, does seem somewhat random, with some living even as long as 10,000 years. But given the fractured and strange nature of time in the 41st millennium, it can be really hard to put accurate expectancies on this, and many Marines who are not killed may reach at least half a century in age. It's no exaggeration to state that on successfully becoming an Astartes, these men would be far from what you would recognise as human. Their extended lives and nearly unbreakable bodies are truly no prize. Their lives from this point on are spent in the sole act of defending humanity and the Imperium of man. Accepting that their lives will be lost in battle at some point in the future, probably in horrific circumstances, they'll never see anyone they had ever known in their lives again. Families, friends will die far before they even begin to think of such things. Space Marines are the protectors. Humanity in the 41st millennium stands on a precipice. We've known many horrors, disasters, and catastrophes, the ending of many worlds, but the next millennia will be the most critical. Threats surround humanity, some still difficult to gauge just how severe and if we can resist them. Our hope is in the Astartes, and the Imperium of Man, and the Emperor. With the Primarch rulebook Guilliman returned, there is a glimmer of hope in the darkness.
Oh yeah, man, I dig it. Is that everything? Man never changes, so war never changes. Nice. Very poetic. Alright guys, so that concludes our awesome breakdown / commentary of Space Marine creation / recruitment. I can proudly tell you that I would never sign up for shit like this, but then again, like, it wouldn't matter if I wanted to sign up for this or not. You know, I'd probably be forced to sign up with how they go about doing things. Like, especially if I'm a degenerate punk that already had a hard knock life, I'm getting enlisted in this shit. It's very cool, man. But once again, it's like, when you look at this shit from a casual eye, it seems like it's super awesome and stuff that you would want to be. But once you go into greater detail in the overall process of how you would become a Space Marine, it's just something that you wouldn't wish on your worst enemy. Given the fact that you have to undergo all these different things at such a young age, by the time you're an adult, you've seen so many things that you're not even phased anymore. And also the idea that these guys are essentially immortal, you know, even though they do have, I'm pretty sure they eventually die, but living 10,000 years, you know, centuries in a sense, wouldn't you be driven mad on some Highlander shit? Your brain would probably break, you know, like something in you would want to die. But I do like the fact that you still have somewhat of a personality and conscience, and you're able to do stuff of your own volition if you want to, that doesn't really like fit with the overall code that the Imperium has enforced. I like that, because I do remember my man Titus actually doing certain things that did not quite go well with the creed that's been put on him, you know, and they were accusing him of being a heretic in a sense because of this power that he had. I think he had possessed some kind of chaos ability, if I'm not mistaken. All in all, I can't wait to see how this is going to translate in the game. You know, something within me wants to go back and play the Space Marine game so I can actually prepare for what's going to happen in the sequel that's going to be coming out this, if I'm not mistaken, this September. I don't know. It's just so much about the world. It's dark, but I can't stop looking at it. It's like you see all these different things that are very heinous in nature, even from the humans. You know, it's like you're picking the lesser of two evils. You know, I'm understanding more and more why the fucking Imperium of mankind is so crazy and a bit overzealous in their acts, you know, to kind of eradicate all the chaos and heretics out there. Because if you don't have like an ironclad sense of law and enforcement, you know, any little fragment of chaos can just cause all kinds of damage, you know, and wreak havoc. So it's understandable. You know, there are uncharted territories that may pose a threat to humanity. So it kind of pays to be crazy, but it's just crazy that humanity has come this far. You know, I feel like we are watching like a foretelling of what we could potentially be. You know, I know technology isn't there, and we can only imagine what it's like to have all these different things done to us, all these different enhancements and stuff. But I just love how this is essentially like a foreshadowing what could be. Yeah, like that's cool, man. But anyways, once again, I want to give a major shout out to Lewitton on this. I really love this narration and overall commentary on these things, and I like the production value too. You know, it has this weird kind of like eerie feeling to it, just going on the ins and outs of all the different things, like the different processes and stuff, and essentially all the different rankings, you know, because you're essentially like you go from a Wee Roach, Weenie Hut Jr., and all these other things, you know what I'm saying, Neophytes or whatever, and the Initiate or the Scouts. Like I like shit like that, you know. There's still like this ranking system that you have to go through, and once again, there's a small, like there's a high percentage that you're gonna die, and there's a low percentage of you actually being able to sustain these gene seed implants. So yeah, I really enjoyed myself with this. As always, I hope you guys enjoyed watching this video, because, you know, I really have a blast watching them with you and for you. If there's anything that I may have missed or got misconstrued, you know what you got to do, man. Provide the proper context in the comment section below. I know you guys are way more informed than I'll ever be when it comes to this, because this thing predates me. You know, it's older than me. This is a property that's been going on for years, so I'm pretty sure there are a lot of you guys that have done a lot of extensive research and essentially immersed yourself in the world of Warhammer 40K. So yeah, do that for your boy, man. And be sure to smash that like button too, man. Like, be sure to smash it. And let's try to hit the like goal of 1,000 to reassure me that you guys do want to see more Warhammer 40K related content from me, man. But that's all I got for you guys today. What did you think about this? Let me know in the comment section below. But once again, this is your boy RBG, aka the Random Black Gamer. We ain't seen it. Hopefully I'll see you guys on another Warhammer 40K video. Peace.